Hey guys, today's project, get this thing finished up, get it running. But I have to replace the ignition key assembly because there's no key that came with it. So it was probably lost 40 years ago. And also replace the contactor on the bottom since I'm in there digging. Might as well replace that. This is only like 10 bucks. This whole key assembly was used in the late 70s through the 80s and even the 90s. They're all the same for all the Volkswagens, the Jettas even. So let's get started, pull off the wheel, and then start digging into it. And since a lot of you probably know how to do this already, there's plenty of videos on how to do it on YouTube. I'll go into time warp. So here we go. Alright, I have the ignition switch assembly out of the Volkswagen, and again I have a 74 Volkswagen thing, and this comes off the steering shaft. Pull the steering wheel off and I'll show you how to put this together, but the challenge I'm having is to replace the ignition lock because no key was found with the thing when I bought it. So I'm going to have to take out the ignition assembly, which is right here, and replace it with a new one, which I have the keys. These are about 18 bucks on Amazon even, and they're used in 70s, 80s, 90s. All the Volkswagens have the same ignition assembly switch. So I'm going to have to take it out of here. But the thing is, on a 74 Volkswagen thing, and usually all the Volkswagens, when you look at where the ignition switch goes in, there's usually an access hole there where you can push down the spring that holds the assembly in. And if you can see that right there's this spring steel that needs to be pushed down like that. And then it'll pull right out. So I don't have an access hole, and I've never seen a Volkswagen assembly like this where there wasn't an access hole. So guess what? I'm going to have to go in and start operating on it and probably give it a root canal here and drill a hole right where the spring steel would be. And this is aluminum, so it's easy to drill, nice and soft. And I'll use an 1/8 inch drill bit. And I haven't seen this on YouTube anywhere. I scoured the interweb for any videos regarding how to do this, and I haven't seen one anywhere. I have seen some on other vehicles, non-Volkswagens, where they've had to do this, but I'm going to give this a shot, and worst case, I'll have an 1/8 inch little hole. I could always plug it with JB Weld, but it won't ruin the strength at all. But I'm going to measure back, from my plunger in here and get my markings for the hole. I'll center punch it and then drill it. And then hopefully I'll be able to push an awl or a rod down in there against that spring, release it, and just pull this whole assembly out. Pop the new one in, and I'm done. So I'm going to do some measuring. Man, I actually hit it. So for you doing this, this is going to be, this hole is about, from the edge of this casting right here, it's going to be about a 1/4 of an inch in from the outside of this casting in, 1/4 of an inch in, and probably about 3/16 of an inch up, and then just push the awl in here, push it down, and guess what? Ha! There it is. So now I can remove this, and then I'll foul this a little bit in here, and then put some grease in here. And then here's your plunger in here too for the steering wheel lock. I'll get that all lubed up down in there, so success. All right, it's working. The next step is to replace the actual contactor. And you may have to replace this. Very simple to do. What made this complicated was taking out the whole key assembly, but it just pops in the bottom and there's just one little screw that holds it in. So pop the old one out, that's probably all arced out and corroded. Pop the new one in place, like so. So I think I'm going to put a piece of Gorilla Tape over that hole that I drilled, keep the dirt and stuff out. Then the next thing I like to do is use some of this Noah locks. You buy this stuff at Home Depot. And I use this on my RVs, my ATVs, my cars, electrical connections, battery connections, and just put a little dab of, it's like electrical grease, and it'll keep any corrosion from happening. So the first thing you want to do, and just do this in reverse order to take the unit apart, but you'll notice this little tab that's welded, kind of crappy weld on the side of the steering tube. And what that's going to do is going to line up with this slot, and you'll see in the bottom here, this is where the Allen bolt goes in, and that's going to be the cinch bolt that goes in there and then clamps onto this. The next thing I'm going to do is clean all the electrical connectors out, make sure they're all clean. Put some of my electrical grease on it. And this is the whole assembly that's going to go back in again, make sure all these leads are cleaned up. So I'll go clean these up and let's get the rest of it installed. Okay, so next is the assembly here. I'll get a light on it. Let's see a little bit better. This whole assembly comes out. It's going to just basically pull out after you disconnect the plug. So just reach up underneath here, pull them loose, and they'll hang. There's 3 of them, and then you'll have 2 of the hoses go on to the hoses which operate the windshield washer. So you're using your tire pressure to pressurize the vessel that has windshield wiper fluid, and then when you pull your handle, it's going to complete it and pass it through the hoses here. So disconnect those hoses, get everything cleaned up, and this is going to come apart. So this could actually, this section here could actually pull it out, and then there's 4 standoffs. So if you pull on a little bit and it comes off the standoffs, don't worry about it. You could always just put it back on, line up the little pins, the standoffs, and then push it back together again. So now we're just going to ease it back into the slot here, line it up, and jiggle it a little bit. Figured out some of the wiring. It was butchered, so I should be able to start this thing. So like the guy saying on the interweb on YouTube, will it run? So let me get the camera set down over here. You guys can get a first row seat, and let's give it a little bit of help with some ether. First time in 40 years if it starts up. The ignition switch is working.
Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hey guys, back in the shop this morning, and you may have heard the fan belt chirping the last time I ran it. It's very loose, but the Volkswagens have a unique way of tightening the belt. Normally you have a slot on a arm that you undo the bolt and tighten up the alternator that way. However, on the Volkswagen, there's no room for a tensioner or anything like that. So what they do is stack washers on the inside and then store them on the outside. So what I need to do is take this nut off, pull the washers off on the inside. I'll probably take one or two off. You can see this is pretty loose. And then put it back on again and put the washers on the outside so you could store them. And that should take care of it, tighten this up. So you put the screwdriver, you'll notice there's a slot in the back of the pulley here. So just put a screwdriver in there, take a, 21 millimeter wrench, and wedge it right there with your screwdriver, and then undo the bolt. Project's getting exciting now, man. I'm just putting on the air cleaner. So the air cleaner was missing when I got the car along with the engine. It was tore out 50 years ago or 40 years ago. But special thanks to Mike at thingparts.com back in New York. Then I was able to get a used oil bath air cleaner. And for you new guys, youngsters that aren't familiar with oil bath air cleaners, that's what we used to do before there were paper filaments. So I have a bath of oil, air goes in, hits the oil at a right angle, all the dirt is caught in the oil, and you get clean air going into the car. But I guess they stopped them years ago. Paper filament type filters are much easier to use and probably a lot better for the environment. People were probably changing this and dumping the oil around a fence post, or not that I've ever done that, but it's probably what they were doing. So anyway, so this is your container oil on the bottom. This is the top filter. So I just cleaned this out with some brake clean. And inside here, you're going to see a red line around the outside of it. That's where you're going to fill the oil up. Put the oil in there, drop it in, and you can just pretty much use any kind of oil. I got some 1030 here, so I'm going to go ahead and dump some oil in this and get it ready to put back on the car again. Setting the timing on a VW air-cooled motor, pretty simple. What I like doing is using a vacuum advanced type timing light, and I've got one of these deals here. Got it on Amazon for, it was like 30 some bucks. And then what you're going to do is loosen the distributor so you can turn it a little bit. It's kind of finger tight. And then hook up a positive wire. I like just hooking it since we have positive right here. Hook it on the alternator and then get a ground on the alternator. Should be fine for what I'm doing here. Get it on there. Then what you're going to do is connect this induction pickup onto #1 cylinder, which is this wire right here. So, and then mark your pulley. You'll see some notches in the pulley, and mark that with some paint. You see the notches right here. So maybe I'll get some white so it'll show up better on the camera. So the timing light's all hooked up, and nice digital one here. And most Volkswagens, what you're going to do is set it for 28 degrees of advance. So right here is a button on here. I could look at my RPM or my advance. So I'm going to set it for 28 degrees. I can change that up and down right here. It's pretty slick how this thing works. And it is set for a 4-cylinder vehicle. And I'll go in now, put it on RPM. Let's get it started. Get it up to 2800 RPM. And then the timing mark right here, marked with a paint, should be in line with the case where it's split right in the middle. So recap, 2800 RPM, I want 28 degrees advanced on my notch. And you saw that in the video. It's a little bit hard to talk with the sound of the motor going. And tighten up your 10 millimeter, and that should be it. Done.